With subcompact crossovers like this becoming a hot commodity nowadays, I will still be swimming upstream and saying that hatchbacks are better. However, because clearly this isn't a hatchback, I had a bit of a closed mind when I first got into this. But today I'm going to be mature and give this thing the benefit of the doubt. So let's take a look at Mazda's smallest entry in their crossover lineup, the CX-30. The subcompact CX-30 is based off of its platform mate, the Mazda 3 hatchback. And if you're looking at one of these, you're probably looking at other subcompact crossovers. Well, crossovers like the Hyundai Kona, the Toyota Corolla Cross, and other small SUVs in this category. So this CX-30 is a 2023 Premium Plus with the 2.5-liter turbo in Snowflake White Pearl Mica. That's a long name. It is a pretty color, but I don't think white works on this car. Do you see a resemblance? The MSRP of this fully optioned egg is right around $38,000, which is a lot of money for a little car. But if that's too much for you, Mazda does offer the CX-30 in a base trim that starts at around $23,000. Now, my biggest gripe with the appearance of the CX-30, I usually don't talk about looks, but this car has actually offended me a little bit by how much cladding Mazda has put on these. The fender flares are really what do it for me, but even on the lower door area, it doesn't need that much cladding because this isn't gonna go off-roading. Aside from its looks, the CX-30 is still a universally appealing vehicle because of its powertrains, and it has two available engine options. One, if you don't like speed, and the other, if you do like speed. So we're gonna focus on the turbo today, and you're gonna deal with it because that's the one that I have. This is Mazda's corporate 2.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. You'll find this in many Mazdas today, from the CX-9 with this engine to the Mazda 3. It's such an excellent powertrain and it delivers power very well, but I'll talk more about that later. Mazda has also tuned this engine to work under different levels of octane. So with 87 octane regular gas, this makes 227 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque. Impressive numbers, but if you want a little bit more and you put 93 octane or premium gas in it, it makes 250 horsepower and a stump-pulling 320 pound-feet of torque. Very impressive numbers considering this thing is about 3,500 pounds. So this engine will get this thing up to 60 miles an hour in just under 6 seconds. All-wheel drive is standard for the turbo model, and these use a 6-speed automatic transmission. A little bit archaic compared to the 8, 9, and 10 speeds of nowadays, but if you think about it, these subcompact crossovers either use regular transmissions, CVTs, or dual clutch. So I'm happy with this 6-speed auto. In terms of MPGs, Mazda claims 22 in the city, 30 on the highway, and a combined rating of 25. Now, especially considering the power that this thing makes, that's not bad at all, but Mazda puts small gas tanks in their cars, at least with the turbo. This has just under a 13-gallon fuel tank. And I know that isn't inherently bad because it makes it cheaper to fill up, but more often to fill up as well. We're gonna be watching some tennis soon, but Mazda offers these little eggs with 18-inch wheels on every trim except the base 2.5S. I believe that comes with 17-inch alloy wheels. Now, this one being a turbo model gives it black wheels. You can't get a turbo without the black wheels unless if you go aftermarket or a dealer accessory. To me, a small hindrance of these smaller crossovers is the size of the trunk. It's virtually identical to their hatchback counterparts, but this one does have a power tailgate. I just don't know if it's working hard or if it's hardly working, but you have about 20 cubic feet of volume behind this second row seat. And for 1 or 2 people, it's pretty adequate. I can fit my backpack in here and also my camera bag, and I think you could probably fit a child or an adult back here. Maybe, but if you want more space for more things or more people, you have 45 cubic feet of volume with the second row seat folded flat. This one does have a donut spare tire. Thanks for Mazda for doing that. Anyways, in terms of towing, Mazda says you can tow up to 1,500 pounds with this, but I don't think I would really tow with this. If you did get a hitch on this though, it would be pretty useful for a bike rack or a little utility trailer. But if this was also my car, I'd put roof racks on it. Now, I've only gotten in the rear seat of this once already while I was shooting B-roll, but so let's see. It's actually not that bad. The driver's seat is in my position. I'm 5'9", and my feet do fit under the seat. My knees are just barely touching the back seat, well, the back of the front seat. Let me close the door. The only thing is, to me, if I was paying almost 40 grand for this, let's say 40 grand out the door, there's hard touch plastic. It's only in the back. The front is a little bit better, but the bottom of the seat isn't too bad. It's actually pretty comfortable and the material is pretty soft. It's a perforated leather. The only downside that I can see is the center drivetrain hump being a little bit intrusive, so I think only 2 of me could comfortably fit back here and maybe 3 kids. There is an armrest in the middle, pretty soft, with 2 cup holders which are reasonably sized. There's no USB ports in the back of the CX-30, but there are 2 air vents, so I'm glad that Mazda thought of the rear seat passengers, even at this price point. All right, so Mazdas have always been known to be drivers, so we'll soon be driving this, but let's start it up. Again, this is the newer Mazda key fob. It's pretty simple and kind of plasticky. The buttons are on the side, just like the Volvo key fobs nowadays, but not too bad. The CX-30 is a pretty decent place to be inside. Interior quality feels pretty nice. The soft touch materials on the dash, they do get harder as you go up, but you're not gonna touch the windshield cowl of the car anyway. The seats are comfortable though. The driver's seat is 8-way power with 2-way lumbar, but the passenger seat is only manual. Just like the rear seats, the material is pretty comfortable. They're nice to sit in, reasonably supportive, especially for this class, so I like them. This one has a 3-spoked leather-wrapped steering wheel. You'll see this on most newer Mazdas. I like it a lot. Feels nice to the hand, and this one has heat in as well. The horn. Mazdas have good sounding horns, and there's paddle shifters behind the wheel, and the headlights are automatic, and also the wipers on this Premium Plus. The gauges in this one are pretty simple. They look just like a lot of the current Mazda gauges out there, but you can only see the trip computer, the active safety control systems, and just the speedometer. It doesn't even change anything when you put it into sport. It just says sport. And continuing our screen talk, this one has the upgraded 8.8-inch display, unlike the CX-50, and I think even the CX-5 now does it. You can't touch the screen even in park on this, so you have to only use the rotary dial, which isn't terrible, especially if you get used to it, but I still would prefer the option of a touchscreen. The interface is pretty okay for me. It's pretty simple, so there's no way to really get lost in it. This does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it's only wired. And this car doesn't support USB-C. When you put the car into reverse, you do have a backup camera and a 360 view camera, so that's a nice touch. And I do appreciate that Mazda has decent quality for their cameras as well. The climate control is super simple. Thank you, Mazda, for not embedding the climate control system in the infotainment, because that's just annoying, so I like the hard touch buttons. The armrest looks real nice. It's a nice soft material, and it has stitching. I think it's faux stitching, I'm pretty sure. But the center console itself isn't too deep, but you can fit some things in there. There's 2 USB type A ports and a charger, a car charger that ties to the battery, so the car doesn't have to be running. But of course, things that I would expect in this price point: an auto dimming rearview mirror with garage home link, LED interior lights. That's a real nice touch. So right off the bat, I will say I do see why people like these smaller crossovers or hatchbacks on stilts, because they're still small little things that you can drive around, urban dwellers that are still higher up, because you do feel higher up than a Mazda 3 in this thing. Mazdas have always been known to be pretty decent drivers. Even the crossovers, the CX-5, the CX-9, good handling vehicles, and this one definitely does not disappoint. The only thing I can say is that the ride is a little bit firm. Not really bothering me, and I wouldn't say jittery, but you definitely notice the bumps. The steering is smooth and light, which makes it pretty easy to drive. It's not that loud. Of course, this engine has been used for a bit of time already, so it's pretty refined. Oh my God. Let's try the power here. Good power. It's interesting though, because right here is the Mazda CX-30. I don't really know what the difference between a CX-3 and a CX-30 is. I know the CX-3 is a little bit older, but they seem about the same size. The CX-5 also rides a little bit smoother because of its longer wheelbase and different suspension geometry, but this is still a good car. I'm not saying it's a bad car, it's just, it's in an interesting spot for me to really judge. Around the corners, this thing is pretty fun though, for being a crossover, and small. For being a crossover, it does handle corners pretty well, and it's quick. This, you can have fun with it on a back road. That's the thing. And it handles great. The steering is quick, responsive. Sport, I haven't even tried sport mode, but I'm assuming that just controls the transmission. I'll put myself in sport mode, and like, it's not like blisteringly fast or anything. On a back road, I'm pretty sure it would feel pretty quick, but around town, this is great for being around town because it makes passing people, and if you need to get in front, like if you're front of line at a green light and you need to get over, very confident power, very confident. Sport mode really does just change, like keep it in a lower gear. There's not a lot of turbo lag either, so Mazda did a really good job with that. Like, for example, if you have to pass two nincompoops, great power. Like, you don't have to floor it to accelerate well in this car. We can do a second gear roll. Wow! Like, you just don't really feel the speed, but the brakes compensate for the power, thankfully. I've noticed in some other Mazdas with this turbo, the brakes are kind of weak. It's great. But, like, you know, it just makes driving more fun, you know? Because this handles well, but this, again, just remember, this is not a sporty crossover by any means. The engine to me in these smaller Mazdas, especially like the Mazda 3, the CX-5, the CX-30, anything with this turbo 2.5, I was about to say turbo 5-cylinder, but this turbo 2.5, the engine just makes the experience so much more refined. It's not as quiet, like it's not as loud, power comes down a little bit smoother, and there's a lot of power when it does kick in. I guess at this almost 40 grand price point, you could start to think about competing this with the BMW, what's that, X2, the Audi Q3, the Mercedes GLA, things like that. But this is just borderline competing with those things. But Mazda is marketing their vehicles to be a little bit more up class, and honestly, this does feel like it would compete with the GLA. So they're pretty solid in that regard. So despite its enjoyable driving dynamics and its decent technology and opulence for this size of car, but if you're looking at the CX-30, it isn't a bad car, it's just not a Bern car. But I hope you enjoyed this review and getting up close and personal with the 2023 Mazda CX-30. If you have one, let me know in the comments below. There's sirens, the thing's on fire, but let me know if you have one, and let me know how you feel about your CX-30. But before it starts raining, I'm going to let you guys go, but thank you again for watching this video. Thank you for 19,000 subs. Let's try to get to 20 soon. I would say by the end of this month, but let's try. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, peeps.